goodness. Whoa, I've been introduced a lot, but that is one of the best ever. I have the deepest respect, admiration for Geneva, her spirit, her commitment to take the terrible loss of her daughter, Sandra Bland, and turn that grief into action. She's here with her daughters, Siobhan, Sierra, Shante, and her wonderful husband, Mr. Ricky Veal. And so I know that every one of us wants to express again our appreciation to Geneva Reed Veal and her family, not just for being here, not just for her strong endorsement, which I deeply appreciate, but for who they are, for the kind of courage and spirit that they show to all of us. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, there are other mothers of the movement here with us. Women who have lost their children. In one case, a daughter and a granddaughter, to gun violence, to the inexplicable, horrifying loss of those you love, to something so senseless. I just want to recognize them as well. Cleo Pendleton, mother of Hadia Pendleton. Annette Nance Holt, mother of Blair Holt. Pamela Bosley, mother of Terrell Bosley. Maria Pike Davis, mother of Ricky Pike. And Yolande Henry Corner, mother of Nova Henry. I've had the privilege of spending time with a number of mothers who find themselves in the worst possible position any mother could ever be. Looking at pictures of their children, hearing the stories, and the resolve in their voices that they want to do everything they can to help prevent any other mother from going through what they've gone through. I think we owe it to them. We owe it to them to reform police practices, to make sure that no other young woman like Sandra Bland is ever pulled out of a car for no good reason and thrown into a jail where she is found dead. We owe it to the families of young men like Laquan McDonald, and the other names that we know all too well: Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, and so many others. And we also owe it to the mothers whose children went out to a playground, like Hadia Pendleton did, shortly after performing at President Obama's second inauguration. Can you imagine the honor and the excitement that young woman felt? And then just one night, some days later, hanging out with her friends in a playground across from her school, a random bullet ends that promising young woman's life. You know, these stories cannot be just ones that provoke our emotions. They must move us to action. They must. They must motivate every one of us to take on these issues, reforming police practices, and making it as hard as possible for people to get guns who shouldn't have them in the first place. And that is the commitment I've made to these mothers. I know how hard it is. I'm not standing up here in the company of your dedicated members of Congress like Bobby Rush and Danny Davis and Robin Kelly telling you anything you don't know. People talk about how powerful lobbies are in Washington, and they are. Big money, big oil, drug companies, insurance companies, but I don't think there is a more powerful lobby than the gun lobby. Because what it is able to do is intimidate people, intimidate elected officials, prevent common sense reforms like the ones I am proposing, like the ones President Obama is backing. All we want is common sense. We want comprehensive background checks that close the gun show loophole and the online loophole. We want to close what is called the Charleston loophole. And let me explain to you what that is. There is a 3-day business limit, the time you have to conduct a background check. At the end of 3 days, the person wanting to buy the gun can come back and buy it. Whether or not the background check is complete, whether or not the records from local and federal law enforcement have arrived on your computer. That's what the killer in Charleston did. He went and applied to buy that gun. At the end of 3 days, he came back. He was sold the gun, despite the fact that if there had been just one more day, the record of his felony conviction would have gotten there, and he would not have been able to buy that gun. But he did. And then he took that gun, and he went to Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And he walked in during Bible study, didn't he? And he was welcomed. Because the good, faithful people there, they knew their scripture. They knew to welcome the stranger, and they did. The stranger came in. He sat amongst them as they discussed their Bible lesson for that week. And then at the end, he took out that gun and killed 9 faithful people. This is common sense, my friends. It's also common sense to prevent people who have been put on what's called the no-fly list because there's credible evidence that they have some potential link to terrorism. That people on that no-fly list should not be able to buy a gun in America. Common sense. But every time Congress, the Democrats in Congress try to pass that common sense provision so that gun sellers can check the list that includes people on the no-fly list, gun lobby tells all the people they intimidate, don't you dare vote for that. Makes no sense. So we have work to do, and I'm going to work on this every single day as president. Every single day. I'm going to do everything I can Because here's how I feel about it. As a mother and a grandmother, we have a lot of barriers to knock down that hold people back. We've got to build ladders of opportunity, especially for communities that have been left out and left behind. But nothing's more precious than a child's life. And while we're knocking down those barriers, we need to do everything we can to protect our children and all the other Americans who lose their lives every year, 33,000 of us every year, to gun violence. Now, yesterday in Harlem, I was able to speak to a large crowd of people I knew well because I'd represented them in the Senate for 8 years. Elected officials, community activists, professionals, business leaders, young activists and citizens, to outline what I intend to do to break down the barriers. It's important that we look at everything that holds people back, and yesterday, my core emphasis and commitment was to knocking down the barriers that hold back African Americans. There is something wrong, my friends, when African Americans are nearly 3 times as likely as whites to be denied a mortgage. When the median wealth of black families is just a tiny fraction of the median wealth of white families. And yes, when gun violence is the leading cause of death of young African American men, more than the following 9 causes all combined. Something is wrong. When black children in Flint, Michigan are poisoned with lead in their water because their governor wanted to save money. We need to face the reality of systemic racism. If we are going to be able to break down the barriers in our economy, our society, and our political system that disproportionately affect African Americans and build those ladders of opportunity in their place. We've got to break down the barriers of bigotry. We've got to make sure that young children here in Chicago have the same chance at a quality education as children in the suburbs of Chicago. We've got to make sure that transportation can take people to the jobs that are available so that they can actually get to work when they find a job opportunity. We've got to make sure that immigrant families don't live in fear. They can come out of the shadows. They're not vulnerable to deportation and mistreatment and exploitation by employers. We have to be sure that finally women are paid equal pay for the work we do. You know, there's a lot of things I have to say in this campaign that I stop and think to myself, it is 2016. And I'm still talking about making sure women get equal pay. There's something kind of out of sync about that. You know, there is actually evidence that proves women don't get paid equally. Now, the Republicans deny all of that. They don't believe that there's a problem. But we're going to work and fight until we finally get enforceable equal pay laws so that no woman, like the woman I met in New Hampshire, who'd worked in a store for 4 years as a cashier, she recommended her son for an opening during the summer. He was 17 years old, comes to work, doing exactly the same job as his mother. His first paycheck, he's really excited. takes it home, he shows it to her, and her face falls. And he says, "Mom, what's wrong?" She says, "You are being paid more an hour than I am being paid right now after 4 years." And I asked the young man who told me this story, I said, "What did you do?" He said, "I didn't know what to do." He said, "But eventually I got up my nerve as, I was leaving to go back to school, and I said to the manager, I noticed that I got paid more than my mother. Can you explain that?" And with a totally straight face, the manager says, "Well, we like to attract young men because maybe they'll become managers. We can put them on a track to a position in the company." And to this young man's credit, his mother really raised him right, Geneva. He told me, he said to the manager, "Well, what about my mom? She's a good worker. She does everything she's asked to do." And the manager said, "Well, we like to recruit promising young men." This is the reality for so many working women. And we also need to raise the minimum wage because nobody working full-time should still be in poverty. And let's break down all the barriers of discrimination against the LGBT community, because now you can get married on Saturday, but you can get fired on Monday. So we need to make sure we don't have any barriers of discrimination against anybody willing to work, anybody willing to do their job. We need more of that in America. We don't need to be erecting barriers. We need to be knocking them down. We've heard a lot in my campaign with my opponent, Senator Sanders, about Washington and Wall Street. And look, we both agree we need to get secret, unaccountable money out of politics. In fact, we need to get rid of Citizens United, that terrible decision the Supreme Court made. And we agree that Wall Street can never be allowed to wreck Main Street again. And no bank is too big to fail, and no executive is too powerful to jail. We agree on that as well. But I want you to know this. We need a president, yes, who's passionate about getting as much as possible money out of politics and reining in Wall Street, but we need a president who's passionate about creating jobs and raising incomes like I am for hardworking middle-class families again. We need more growth in our economy, more jobs, jobs that can't be exported, jobs in infrastructure, manufacturing, clean renewable energy. That will put millions of people to work, and we know how to do this, my friends. At the end of my husband's 2 terms in office, and he was in this ballroom about 9 years ago, our good friend, Elsie Higginbotham, is the one who really brought this back as a place in the community that people gather and have events like this. I want you to remember, and I want the young people to hear this, because, there's a lot of talk about, we got to tear down everything in order to build up. Well, I'll tell you what happened at the end of the Clinton administration. We had 23 million new jobs. And incomes went up for everybody, not just those at the top, for middle-class families, working families. We lifted more people out of poverty than any time in recent American history. And here's what I especially want African-American families to remember. The median family income went up 17%. The median African-American family income went up 33%. Because there were a lot of new jobs. People could actually get those jobs, do those jobs, provide for their families, get on that ladder of opportunity to a better future. That's what I want to see us do again. And I'm confident we can. But we got to believe we can. We have to decide we're going to work together. We have to decide that we're going to make progress every single day, step by step. I got to tell you, when I look at what's happening here in Illinois, the Republican agenda to roll back the clock on everything that made the middle class strong in the 20th century, it's pretty terrifying. They even want to make it harder to vote in a lot of states. They want to undercut workers' rights, undercut unions. You know, the American labor movement was essential to building the American middle class. A lot of what we achieved in the 20th century is now at risk. And add to that, we have the Supreme Court hanging in the balance. You know, Republicans say that they won't even consider a nominee that the president sends forth, no matter how qualified. Some have even said President Obama doesn't have the right to nominate anyone. As if, you know, he's not our real president. Now, a lot of them do live in an alternative reality. We recognize that. Well, not only is he our president, but under the Constitution, he has a responsibility to fill this Supreme Court vacancy. And I served in the United States Senate for 8 years, and the United States Senate has an obligation to act on that nomination. You know, you hear some of the Republicans say, oh, well, there's not enough time left. That is so ridiculous. The longest contested nomination I'm aware of in recent times was the 100 days it took to confirm Clarence Thomas. President Obama has more than 300 days left. The other argument is, well, it's an election year. And the president was great yesterday when he said, oh, there's nothing in the Constitution about how you can't nominate somebody in an election year. There's also precedent for it. President Reagan was in his last year. There was a vacancy. He nominated someone. That someone turned out to be Justice Kennedy. He was confirmed by the Senate. There's just not a leg for them to stand on. This is pure, naked hostility and opposition to the President of the United States. Now, here in Illinois, we have the opposite problem. You have a governor who I heard is giving his budget address today. I mean, this is material for some kind of sitcom. Because he'll be speaking without actually having a budget in place. Your governor has refused to start budget negotiations unless his so-called turnaround agenda gets passed first. Now, his plan would turn Illinois around, all right, all the way back to the time of the robber barons at the end of the 19th century. That's where he wants to take this state. He wants to slash prevailing wage standards for construction projects, a policy that benefits middle-class families. He wants to undermine public employees, hard-won rights to bargain collectively, the way that Scott Walker did in Wisconsin. He wants to cut benefits for workers who are hurt on the job. And that's on top of the thousands of parents who have been cut off from affordable child care in this state. And he has cut services for people struggling with drug addiction, turning them away from treatment. He also has really put extra burdens on low-income students who were counting on state MAP grants to go to college. Many of Illinois' public colleges and universities stepped up to cover the fall semester But they don't have enough money to do that for the spring. They need a governor who will actually pass a budget. Chicago State University won't be able to pay its bills after March 1st. They need the governor to pass a budget. And we should be making it easier and more affordable for students to go to college, stay in college, and graduate from college. But if you follow the money, as you should, all these cuts to people hurt on the job, students, colleges, universities, are to benefit people on the top. There's just something wrong. You know, I'm a native of Illinois. I was born in Chicago, right? Now, we used to have disagreements. There were Republicans and Democrats. My father was a Republican. We had arguments around the dinner table every night once I got to high school. But there was also a common sense understanding. There were certain things the government did, certain things the private sector did, certain things that not-for-profit, faith communities, and others did, and it all worked together. We've lost that. We've lost that consensus, and we've got to rebuild it. So here's my pledge to you. I will work harder than anyone to make the changes that actually improve people's lives. And I won't make promises I can't keep. We don't need any more of those. And in my experience, to make change, you've got to keep fighting every single day. You've got to keep pushing. It's not easy. There are a lot of folks who defend the status quo, or in your governor's case, want to go back 120 or 30 years. And if you're knocked down, you got to get right back up. I know that because that's what I've had to do. And I believe with all my heart, that's what our country is ready to do. The people that I have met throughout this campaign and all the years before, they can't wait to get their prescription drug costs down. They can't wait to make college more affordable. They can't wait to be able to refinance their student debt to get the thousands of dollars of debt off their backs. And so we have work to do, my friends. I really believe that if we look to our last two Democratic presidents, both of whom I know well, we can see what real leadership looks like. Leadership on behalf of the people, leadership against the vested interests, leadership that in both cases inherited big economic problems from their Republican predecessors. In my husband's case, it was a recession, a ballooning national debt, a big deficit. He got no help from the Republicans, not a single vote. And he had to get up every day and work as hard as he could to make progress for the American people. President Obama, our young, dynamic president, comes into office. He gets handed the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That was a result of Republican policies. I was in the Senate. I saw what they did. They inherited a balanced budget and a surplus from my husband. They inherited an economy that was working. You always have to make adjustments, but it was on the right track. And they proceeded to do what they always do, go back to trickle-down economics that favor the few over the many, cut taxes on the wealthy, get out of the way of Wall Street, get out of the way of the mortgage market, and we know what happened. So when President Obama was elected, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. We ended up losing 9 million jobs overall, and 5 million homes were lost. $13 trillion in family wealth wiped out. And I bet every one of us in this room knows somebody who falls into one of those categories. I remember meeting with the president-elect right here in Chicago. He called me a few days after the election, asked me to come see him. I didn't know why. Turned out he wanted me to be Secretary of State, which I was deeply honored and flattered by. But before we even got to talk about that, he just looked at me and said, "It is so much worse than they told us." Now, I don't think the president gets the credit he deserves for making sure we didn't fall into a Great Depression. You know, my opponent has been quite critical of the president. You know, he's called him weak, he's called him disappointing. He even tried to advocate for somebody to run against him when he ran for re-election in 2012. Well, I got to tell you, anybody who understands how hard it is to make progress, anybody who understands what this president accomplished from getting the economy back on the track, getting the Affordable Care Act passed, which covers 18 million people, passing the toughest regulations on Wall Street since the 1930s in the Dodd-Frank bill, saving the American auto industry from collapse. I don't know, that's pretty impressive to me. And I am unapologetic. I will build on the progress that President Obama has made. I will take it further. But I need your help. I need your help. You know, we're in a tough election season. We got Republicans saying the most outlandish, outrageous things imaginable, right? They want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Now, they never tell you what they put in the place of it because, you know what, they can't really say it because it amounts to just turning our health care system back to the insurance companies, letting them do what they were doing to us before. You know, before there was Obamacare, there was what they called Hillary Care. I took on the insurance companies. I took on the drug companies. I took them on because they were pricing so many Americans out of any kind of insurance. I'll tell you a quick story. I was at the Children's Hospital in Cleveland, meeting with parents of really sick kids who couldn't get insurance no matter how hard they tried. And one man said to me, he said, "You know, I'm successful. I'm a businessman. I run a business. I provide health insurance to my employees and their families. I can't get anybody to sell me a policy for my 2 daughters who have cystic fibrosis." I said, "What do they say to you when you go and ask them?" He said, "Well, I'll tell you, last time I brought my financial statement so they could see that I could pay for something. Brought my medical costs for my 2 girls. And the guy just looked at it, and then he looked at me, and he said, 'You don't understand. We don't insure burning houses.'" And this man looked at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "They called my little girls burning houses." That's what it was like. For those of you who were not around back then or didn't have to worry about insurance, that was what it was like. Because of President Obama's leadership, we now have the Affordable Care Act. I want to improve it. I want to get the cost down. I will never let the Republicans repeal it. But I will also defend it against efforts to try to start all over again, which is what my opponent has advocated. We are at 90% coverage. We are 10% from universal coverage. I know how to make up that 10%. I know how to get every single American covered with affordable quality care. And my opponent, who won't tell you really what it would cost and how much middle-class taxes would be raised, wants to throw our country into a contentious national debate about health insurance all over again. You know, it does seem to me it's harder to get from 0 to 100 than from 90 to 100%. So I'm not going to overpromise. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep. I'm going to level with you. I'm going to tell you what things will cost. I'm going to tell you how we'll get it done. I'm going to tell you what a difference it will make in people's lives. how we will make progress together, because I am a progressive who believes in making progress. I think that's the definition. So I hope you will sign up to work in my campaign. We need your help. It's exciting to me to be competing again in Illinois, because I have so many of my friends here still, literally from grade school and elementary school. I have the best friends that anybody could have. They travel around the country telling people that, guess what, I really am a real person. They tell more stories and more jokes about me than I hope ever appear in print. But they're so dear to me. We've been through so much together, starting so long ago. And it makes me think a lot about the future. Because now that I'm a grandmother, I have this precious granddaughter. We have another grandchild coming in the summer. And there's something about being a grandparent that makes you think even more about the future, for those of us who are. And here's what I want. I want our children and our grandchildren to grow up with the same hopes and dreams that many of us grew up with the same belief that their hard work will be rewarded, that they will live in safety, so no other mother has to worry when their child goes to a playground or goes to church and helps somebody unload musical instruments and is shot in front of the church. We want our children to grow to adulthood in an America that respects our diversity, that lifts each other up, that breaks down the barriers holding us back. That is what I hope for my grandchild. That is what I hope for every child. I started my professional career as a young lawyer working for the Children's Defense Fund. I learned a lot about the barriers that hold back kids and what we could do about them. And I believe with all my heart that every child in this country deserves a chance to live up to his or her God-given potential. If you will help me in this primary, if you will stand with me, if you will fight for me, I promise you, I will fight for you, I will work for you, and together we will make progress for the future. Thank you all.